Test, test. Good evening, everybody. Can folks in the back hear me okay? Yeah, good. I got some thumbs ups. Cool. My name is Josh Ray. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Pekin. This was posted as a special City Council meeting. However, we only have one City Council member here, Mayor Burris. So there's no quorum. There's not going to be a roll call. There's not going to be any votes taken. There wasn't planned to be anyway. It's just a town hall meeting tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get started. City Manager Dossie is also here. He went outside the room. But also with us from our legal staff, Malia. Oh, I'm sorry, Malia. I can't.
Oh, Rioja.
Rioja, thank you. Malia Rioja, City Engineer Justin Reese, and Nick McQuay, our Director of Building and Development. We are what I would call the development team. So when petitions or inquiries or whatever come, this is kind of the core group of staff that takes care of those things. So tonight, we really wanted to just give an opportunity to inform the public on what does that process look like. So tonight, our intentions of this presentation to inform the public on the city's development process from start to finish. We want to answer questions regarding how land development procedures work. We do not intend to speak to any specific project. We of course believe that there will probably be some questions related to a specific project. Just to be clear, March 24th, we're planning a town hall to talk about the data center development. Tonight, we have no additional information about that. So, I mean, we're happy to answer whatever questions we can, but just so you all know, we don't have any new information about the data center project. We're not taking minutes, nothing like that. It's not gonna be a formal meeting, so you're welcome to ask questions, but that's where we are. That's what we're doing tonight. John, did you want to say anything as we get kicked off? Okay.
You got it all.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Just a process overview that we put together here. Somehow a project starts. So that's the initial discussion. We'll go over that. After that, there might be a real estate transaction involved with the city, or there might not be. The city does own some land around town. We do market sites. So there might be a real estate transaction. We would move on to potentially having development agreements, incentive agreements, those kinds of things. There may be land entitlement things that need to be done, annexation, zoning, site plan approvals. And then even if none of that stuff needs to be done, if a site is already entitled, it's got the proper zoning, something as simple as a commercial remodel, there will still be at the staff level plan reviews for building and civil engineering, those kinds of things. And then throughout the process, if a project went through this entire process, you can see the city council does have spots throughout this process where they approve things. So there's some things that are administrative or technical that staff does, and then there are other things that are policy decisions that our zoning board might recommend decisions, and ultimately the city council would need to approve. So a developer calls.
Can I just ask one quick question? Will this be available on your website or anything after the meeting?
We are not recording it. We don't have a recording, but the presentation, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, we do have a web page for the data center development. We also have several staff pages. We'll put this up somewhere. So a developer calls. Anyone at the city might get the first call. A lot of times it's myself, sometimes it's Nick, could be Justin, could be the mayor, right? Could be our attorney. Somebody's gonna get a call or an email, and that's gonna kick off the process. So again, it might be a real estate broker or a site selector that is looking for something. We do have good relationships with the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, as well as the state of Illinois' kind of economic development agencies. And occasionally they do give us leads, right? They have formal processes where, for example, the Epic Medical Project, that's how that happened. The Epic was looking internationally, or they're an international company looking at the US. They looked at Illinois, got connected with the state connected with Greater Peoria, they connected them with us because we had available sites in our industrial park. So, or it could just be a personal introduction. Somebody met somebody at a conference. That happened to me 2 weeks ago. A residential developer wanted my business card because I was telling them about sites in Pekin. So any one of those ways, that is generally how something happens. The next thing we try to do is, if the project at all seems feasible, we'll have what we would call a pre-development meeting or a one-stop meeting where we get the whole team together in a big room. We go to the city council chambers or conference room, and we have most of the city departments sitting around a table so that we can ask questions, the potential developer can ask us questions all at one point. and we can try to come up with any points of contention, or, you know, we're not really negotiating anything, we're just kind of fact-finding each other out. At that point, if applicable, if it's a big enough project, we'll be touching base with Illinois American Water or Ameren or whoever it might be, right, if that's necessary. So then, let's say that the city real estate is involved. You know, it's a site in the Ludekin property, it's a site elsewhere on Highway 98 where we have land, it's in the industrial park. We do actively market those sites, right? We have a marketing firm, national marketing firm, McDaniels Marketing, is located in Pekin. They do marketing work for us. So we do try to sell sites for development. So again, somebody comes to us, we might start negotiating a sale of our site if it seems like it'll work. So, you know, what's the right size parcel? How, you know, what's the land use gonna be? And we figure out a site, and then we'll say, okay, here we have an appraisal from a year ago that gives us a frame of reference for what the site should be about, but, you know, appraisals aren't exact science, and you ultimately something is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So we negotiate. We say, okay, here's where you're at, here's where we're at. They might want incentives, that comes into play. That's one of the reasons that city council might go into executive session during a meeting, is to talk about our negotiating position. We don't want that to be public because the people on the other side of the negotiating table, right, would know our strategy. So we might go into closed session for that purpose, to discuss, you know, what council is willing to sell a piece of property for. Once we come to something that we believe is going to be an agreement that the city council would approve, our attorneys certainly are involved. They review the terms, they create the contracts that have all of the protections. You know, I referenced down there contingencies and clawbacks. For example, the real estate agreement with the data center does have contingencies in there, right? It's only applicable, or it's conditional upon site plan approval. In other agreements, we have things where if they don't develop within, like a lot of our incentive agreements, if they don't finish the project within a year, they're not eligible for incentives anymore. So we have provisions like that in those agreements. We reference the other development agreements to make sure it all ties together. We spend a lot of time and money to try to get those things right. And then ultimately, it'll go to city council for approval. City staff cannot sell a piece of property. So city council is able to sell property. It takes a simple majority vote to sell property. That's kind of the city's part of a real estate transaction if we are involved. There are many developments, we are not involved in the land sale or land deal at all. It's between private entities. And so then the next step, the city might come in, and I've only got a couple of slides left, and then I'll stop talking and let some of the others, but where the city might come in then next is with some kind of development agreement. So that could be, you know, for a small, you know, downtown building renovation, we might have an incentive agreement through our TIF district, or it could be a really large development agreement. Should we end up doing a 1,500 home development somewhere, right? We would probably have a formal development agreement with that developer, where we will consider things like land use, economic benefits, incentives that they're looking for, natural resource impacts. A lot of times in communities there will be established ordinances for land donations, meaning the developer has to set aside some land for an elementary school or a park or a future fire station, you know, if it's gonna have that level of impact. And the same token, there's something called impact fees, where, okay, for every home that gets built, there has to be $1,500 paid to a fund, and then that fund grows over time, and ultimately the city can use that to build a fire station for that new neighborhood that was built over 5 or 10 years. So there's those types of things that can be included. Public service impacts, you know, certainly some types of development are going to impact our fire and police and parks and schools differently than other developments. So those need to be considered. We have active conversations with our, you know, fellow government entities about these things as we kind of plan for the future and have discussions. You know, the schools, 108 and 303, they have representatives that sit on our Economic Development Advisory Committee, so we keep them up to date. Pekin Park District has a major park right next to the Riverway Business Park, so I, you know, talk to their executive director pretty often. Agreements, you know, oftentimes will also specify those timelines where if you accomplish this by this date, you get this. If you fail to, you're not eligible for it. So those can get really complicated. They could be 5 pages, they could be 50 pages. The last community I worked in had development agreements with a residential developer, and I mean, it just covered everything from, you know, they were building new public roads that the city would eventually, the village up there would eventually take over. So there were provisions about building public roads and how long the developer had to maintain them before the village would take them, all those kinds of things. So real quick, I know people a lot of times wonder what incentives might look like. These are generally the types of incentives that the city might offer or might engage with. There is a defined district called an enterprise zone, particularly in our area. It's the Southern Tazewell Enterprise Zone. That is a multi-jurisdictional area. So it's this pink or purple that you might see on the map up there. Pekin being in the lower left, Morton being in kind of the upper right. So Morton, Pekin, Tremont, Tazewell County all have this shared enterprise zone, which is provided for by the state. You know, the state has to approve it. And that enterprise zone can come with benefits. The biggest one that we usually see is that a large project can basically get a sales tax exemption certificate on all their building materials. So they go to buy building materials somewhere in the state, they don't have to pay a sales tax on that, and that just helps incentivize to get the project in an area that might otherwise be underdeveloped. Property and sales tax increment rebates are something that the city does relatively often, and I stress the word increment because if a business is currently doing, I don't know, $1 million a year in sales, and they say, you know, we want an agreement, but we don't think we're gonna grow our sales at all even if you give us incentives. Like, well, that's probably not a pretty good deal for the city, right? We want them to grow with the incentives. So all we look at is their growth in sales or their growth in property tax value. And that's what we, look at doing incentives with. There might be grants or loans. The city, usually in the summer, at least the past several years, has done small grants for downtown building renovations. We've done forgivable loans with, trying to bring a new restaurant to town. We help them renovate their space, and they have to generate a certain amount of sales tax over 5 years to kind of pay back that loan. We might have other tax agreements. The sale of the land itself could be an incentive, right? Some companies value cash now or land now more than they value long-term real estate tax incentives. So we might sell a property for half value and then provide no other incentives, and that might be the incentive to get that project to happen. Permit fee reductions is something that I personally am not an advocate for, because permits fees are tied to actual things like Nick's time to go out on an inspection. So I don't like waiving those, but that is something that the city council could approve. There are also state level incentives. City doesn't have a lot of say in those. The Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO, they run those procedures. IDOT has some funding to improve state roadways for industrial projects. And there are federal incentives too, but they usually don't come into play very often. So I showed you the enterprise zone. This is also a map of Pekin's other development districts. It doesn't mean anything's automatic. City council has to approve every incentive agreement individually, and the circumstances are different for each one. But if there's a property in one of these districts, it is eligible for some incentives. All right, I'm gonna pass it on to Nick. He's gonna start talking about land entitlement.
Okay, so,
Yeah, it's on.
all right, I'm not as good of a speaker as Josh, and I'm recovering from being sick, so. So annexation, so sometimes projects will require to be annexed into the city. Give a petition to the city. We do have little flow charts of how that process plays out. Typically there's an agreement between a party and the city for the annexation. With that, there would be a hearing for the zoning board for what type of zoning is required for that property. If it's a industrial use, it needs to be zoned industrial. So it would go before the zoning board, and then if the zoning board recommends approval, it would then go before the city council for final approval.
Can you hold the mic up just a little bit?
Yep, sorry.
Thank you.
So zoning, determines what kinds of land use is allowed. So within the city, we have 4 residential, single-family districts, 3 residential multifamily districts, and 2 industrial districts, so light industrial, general industrial. Each have different density, building height, setback requirements, as well as principal uses and special uses. Certain projects require variances, so that could be a variance from building height, building setbacks, things of that nature. Again, there should be a hardship for a variance to be granted. That process, again, looks like it goes before the zoning board. If recommended, then it would go before city council for full approval. Special use, same thing, very similar to a variance, except for, it's not a hardship, but in each district, there's different special uses that are listed, and then would go before the zoning board for a hearing. If approved, goes before city council. Subdivision, again, splitting of parcels, doesn't happen too often. Again, you would have a preliminary plat and then a final plat. Your preliminary plat would go before the zoning board, your final plat and preliminary plat both go before city council for approval. And then your planned unit development, the last time that I know that we've had this in the city was for the Riverway Business Park. We don't see that very often, but within that development district, it has this kind of open plan, open vision for that area. Yep, so here's the next slide. This is kind of the flow chart for how variance works. So, there's initial contact with my department, which is the community development department. We will intake that application, review it, make sure it's correct. Sometimes discuss with the engineering department, other departments, fire department, before we ultimately take it to the zoning board. At that hearing, it's published 15 days before the hearing. And, the applicant needs to provide a hardship. Zoning board will review that application case by case. Sometimes they'll approve it with conditions, sometimes it'll be approved without conditions, or sometimes it'll get denied. If it gets denied, it does not go to city council. If it's recommended to city council, it's approved or denied at that point. Then the variance would stay with that property.
Excuse me, can you speak up, because I don't think that microphone's working.
Sorry, I'm trying. So site plan approval, each new development, besides single-family homes, requires site plan approval. So at first, when a new project is developed, it will come to my department, engineering department, fire department. We will review it, ensure it meets code before it goes to the zoning board of appeals for review. Zoning board of appeals will ultimately review it, ensure that it does meet compliance with the city code. They could also add in other items such as landscaping, things of that nature. Again, in this slide, it calls out kind of what our city code requires for a site plan, to have when it's submitted for approval. If the ZBA does recommend approval, it will go to city council for review, and city council could approve or deny. If they deny, they can send it back to the ZBA for further review. What you have here in front of you is a previous site plan that was approved for duplex development at Parkway in Velby. This project has not been built yet, but is still in the works. On there you see the property setbacks, some private streets, as well as an area for regional detention.
right, so Nick and Josh covered a lot of what goes on. Now, this is the civil, my piece is shorter. But you kind of, that last one, the site plan, that's, you know, an example of the first plan sheet that comes in, and then as the process moves forward, the developer's engineer and architect is gonna develop a full set of plans. And that's really, civil's involved and the engineering's involved in the site plan review, but then we really get involved in that full set. We provide a peer review of those full set of drawings. So every project, it's vastly different depending on what the project is, but kind of the things that are always consistently, right, we're looking at grading plans, we're looking at erosion, you know, stormwater pollution prevention, any of the utility stuff, whether that's going to be private utilities to make sure that meets the codes, or it's utilities that the city will eventually take over, like in stormwater or sanitary, for example. We're also looking at pavement. Again, that might be pavement that is maintained ultimately privately, or it may be pavement that the city will accept. Like, think a subdivision, the developer builds a road in. There are instances where the city then accepts that road as a city road and takes on the maintenance long-term after that. We're, you know, reviewing detention calculations provided by the developer's engineer, any sidewalk improvements, making sure that meets the code, and then just generally any improvements that are happening within the city right away that are adjacent to that property or will eventually become right away. Also, one of the more technical things we do is for certain developments, we'll review the wastewater capacity, and that might even be residential, right? You put a subdivision in, you're making sure, can the wastewater plant handle this flow? And then if it's, say, manufacturing industrial, we're also looking at the strength of that wastewater to make sure that it's you know, below thresholds, that there's no pretreatment required before it can be sent to the wastewater plant, or it can potentially be sent, but we need to charge a surcharge to treat that additional waste that's kind of beyond what we would call domestic wastewater. Also at this time, as probably most of you in the room know, we have a private water utility in town, so the engineering department will coordinate with the private water utility at that point. And then just kind of skipping ahead, as it's all approved and the project is moving forward, this engineering is involved at that point too. We're out you know, doing site inspections to make sure that the things are being constructed generally in accordance with what was approved in the right-of-way. When there's right-of-way repairs being done, the pavement's being patched, say, we have engineering technicians that go out and review that to make sure that the standards are being followed. And also, like, if sidewalks are being constructed, they're being constructed in a compliant way. So I kind of hopped ahead there to what we do internally as we go into construction, but there's also a number of other agencies, the project dependent, that may have permits. You know, water, sewer extensions, those both require EPA. The project may be adjacent to a state route or a township road or a county road, and they may have their own, you know, right-of-way access permit or entrance permit. They may require intersection design studies, things like that for putting in entrances. The city does review those things as they come in, but ultimately we're not the governing body for those things. And just some other examples that are, you know, they're gonna be project specific, right? If it's not in a floodplain, there's no floodplain permitting, but that's all stuff that'd be submitted by the developer's engineer and then peer reviewed by the city.
Okay, so when we get to final submission of the building plans and inspections, that review is performed by staff, so myself, engineering, fire department, we all look at the plans, review them, ensure that they're compliant, go back and forth with architects until we finally get to that set that we can approve and sign off on. There are some projects that we have to utilize outside sources. You know, again, if it's in a floodway or something of that nature, it's a specialized firm that will help review those plans. Sometimes third-party inspections as well. So, you know, when we're reviewing plans, we're reviewing, again, for structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, fuel gas, sewer connections, energy code EDA compliance, so.
Yeah, so then this is our last slide, just to kind of wrap up. Even after a project is basically built, we have ongoing compliance and monitoring. So Nick and other staff will generate a final occupancy checklist that says, hey, you need to finish your grass seeding over here. The city code or your special use permit requires you to plant shrubs over here to block whatever. So we make sure that all of those things are followed before Nick's department grants them a certificate of occupancy to actually occupy the building and start doing what they were doing or planning on doing. If we are taking public improvements, there's a punch list to make sure that was all done and buttoned up and nice. And generally, a developer is going to be required to have some kind of bond or surety of some kind that if they were to just walk away from building a new public road, we would have the ability to access that bond and finish it, or hire somebody to finish it. If an incentive agreement said that they needed to generate some certain amount of sales tax or property tax, we check that every year, right? We get monthly or quarterly reports in from the state on sales tax. We get annually from the county what property tax was generated, and we check those things. And if they owe us money, we send them an invoice. If they're supposed to create a certain amount of jobs, that's very common with state incentives, and it's gonna, I hope it becomes more common in Pekin. I'd like it to, that if a large project says, we're gonna generate 50 jobs, and that was one of the reasons we wanted to approve an incentive agreement, they need to actually generate those jobs. So we check that. And then, long-term, we're talking, we have a property maintenance code, we have a code enforcement department. Nick's department works with them closely to ensure that from everything from fire code compliance to basic property maintenance to structural integrity and dangerous buildings, like we are covering that gamut in the long run, with the professional staff to make sure that projects, once they're built, stay looking nice to the best of our ability. And we're certainly aware that there's a lot of properties around Pekin that have issues. There's only so much staff, there's only so much money to handle it. But what we can absolutely do is the people that are here now can make sure moving forward, a lot of stuff happened before we got here, but we're here now and we can make sure moving forward that stuff goes well. So that's the overview of the land development process. Happy to answer any questions, the three of us or our attorney or John can answer detailed questions. I think I will just walk around with the mic to make sure everybody can hear your question.
I can walk around.
Mary, you'd like
Sure,
to?
I'd love to.
Okay.
Josh, real quick, could you give us how you like the meeting to run? Like, do you want us to answer all of our questions? Do you want everybody to have a turn? Could you give us just a little bit of your expectation?
Oh yeah, so I'll just speak loudly. So we've had a few of the town halls in the past. Usually we do have like a podium. Usually we do have the podium up here, but I don't know, it's pretty informal. So basically we'll just pass the mic around. I mean, this is meant to be a less formal, less Robert's rules. Like, you ask questions, we try to give you answers. If we don't have an answer, we will tell you. If it's not germane to the topic, please just send us an email instead and let's talk about what we're here to talk about tonight. Certainly if you have a question about where the data center project is in this process, we can speak to that. But that's the goal.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, Kim, you're up first.
Hello, my name's Kim Bowers. My question is about the comprehensive plan, and it's the one that I believe may have been expired. Is that, or can you address that?
It's
And then
for 3
also,
years, and it was done in 2006, so it should run all the way through this year.
Yeah, so comp plans don't technically expire. You're supposed to do one every 15 to 20 years. They're not exactly a piece of law. They're kind of, there are some statutes wrapped around it, and Amalia might be able to speak to that better. Like, once you pass a comp plan, you're not supposed to pass certain other ordinances within 6 months after doing that. But basically, it's a long-term vision for what the community's supposed to look like as they age out, right? Times change over a generation. We should be doing a new comp plan right now. The problem is they cost about $100,000 to $200,000 to have done, and we got roads to fix. So I don't know if you want to speak to that anymore. Yeah, so somebody said our current comp plan is it's about 20 years old now.
It is.
I guess it seems like either we have to be going under the comprehensive plan that we have, or we have to be making a new one despite the cost, but I don't understand how you're gonna move forward if you don't have a plan.
Yeah, so again, a comp plan is not a piece of law. Like it is not a binding document. Like you can deviate from it. The idea is that you have at a point in time a vision for the community, and over time things change, right? I mean, roads get built and utilities get built and technology, like, so yes, you want to try to follow your comp plan, but it's not like, oh, that parcel says it's supposed to be medium density residential, so therefore it can't be anything else.
Josh, I'm happy to chime
Go
in
ahead.
a little bit.
So I think with a plan, it's not like it's part of the code or a statute or regulation, but it's more like the vision for the community, right? Like what are the components, how do we wanna see overall the area developed, and taking into consideration also, you know, the interests, like what sorts of projects would be a good fit. So it is, it's basically like a compass, like a guide, but again, after 20 years, like we have to reassess, you know, so much has changed, right, over the last couple decades. But yeah, it's more of like a guide, so it's not set in stone, it's not that rigid. But yeah, it's probably time to do
Yeah,
another one.
Well, we have discussed it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the law that governs land use is really the zoning code, and ultimately, like the zoning map is part of the city code. So if a property in the zoning map says it's B3, then only the, you know, uses allowed in B3 are allowed in that district, and if you wanna do something else, city council has to approve a rezoning. But the comp plan, like Molly said, is not rigid like the zoning code.
Thank you.
We have so many things that we are really catching up on, so.
You can leave the mic up there, Mayor Burris, that way they can answer. But thank you.
Thank you.
To the city staff, I want to be transparent. I have 11 questions. Some of them are easy to answer. I think some of them are yes, no. Some of them are going to be I don't know. So I just want to be transparent with you guys as much as possible.
So
Josh.
some of these are open-ended questions.
Yes, some of them are open-ended questions. They're at 100%. Josh, in your first slide, is the process overview always linear? Are there places to that where it circles back and forth? Do those always have to happen in that order? Is there room for differentiation on how that process happens?
Yeah, so, you know, as a hypothetical, right, land entitlement might often be done at the beginning of a project, right? If somebody comes in, like the one example site plan we came up with, that was already zoned residential. So like it didn't need to go through a rezoning process or anything like that. So, you know, we did an incentive agreement with them for real estate tax increment rebates, and then they had a site plan. So like, it's not necessarily linear. Generally, once council has voted on something, you know, if it's gonna change materially, it does have to come back to council. So if we approve a real estate transaction and then over the course of a year, something changes and we wanna change that real estate transaction, you know, we can circle back and go back to city council.
Excellent. Do we search out developments as a city? Do we wait for developers to contact us? Is there a mix in between?
Definitely a mix. This was actually one of the questions I asked in my interview with the city. I said, hey, is this a, you know, we'll build it and they will come, or like are we getting a lot of inquiries? And basically what I was told was, no, nothing's happening, let's go out and knock on doors. So I do some of that. You know, we have consultants that do some of that on our behalf, but we also take inquiries. And, you know, for example, the Epic Medical project came to us. We knew nothing about it. We didn't even know the project name until, you know, they were really engaged with us, and then we met the actual people.
Excellent. In the pre-development meetings that you do as the staff, is there enough information to weigh the pros and cons of the development? And if there is enough, is that something, what information gets used to weigh those? I.e., it's gonna create 100 jobs, but it's gonna cost us this. It's gonna do this, but it's gonna do that. How in-depth does that material in those meetings look?
Go for it, Josh.
Okay. Yeah, so those meetings are kind of just I would say our first check to say, is this project even feasible? Like, we have had meetings where, you know, Nick and our former city engineer and I sat in a meeting with a company that wanted to basically grind up and recycle concrete. And they didn't want to do it inside of a building or anything like that. So we met with them, we talked, and then ultimately it was like, thanks, but no thanks. because there's houses right across the street and we don't want silica dust, you know, rolling right into those. So it's kind of a first check. Is this possible? Does the fire department have a concern about it? Does the police department have, like, what are the things that we should think of at the very beginning of this that we need to look into more? So certainly no decisions are made in that meeting, right? Sometimes the mayor is in them, oftentimes she's not. So, you know, there's no city council members usually involved at that early of the stage. So it's really just staff figuring out, is this possible, and like, what do we need to look into to make sure we inform council appropriately?
The next one is an opinion question, and you can say pass, because that would be fair. In the city staff presentation guidelines, when the city staff does that, they present to the council, do those guidelines require an in-depth process? Does the council allow significant leeway with the staff presentations regarding details and intricacies of the potential development? Pass is an acceptable answer, it's okay.
I would say,
He's pretty good, huh?
there's a couple of questions there. The first one that is a relatively easy answer. Council gives us plenty of leeway, right? Council very rarely forces something on the agenda. They very rarely try to make staff come up with stuff very quickly. We usually, like, if we need weeks to do something, we have weeks to do something.
Sure.
If we feel pretty confident, right, like, Nick has done this before, he knows how it goes, he can make a recommendation a week from now at the next council meeting, that's fine. So there's, and I wouldn't say, like, there are no rigid parameters for, like, what we are going to go through with council, because projects are different. Some of them involve real estate transactions, some don't. Some of them involve incentives, some don't. So really, I mean, you know, pat myself on the shoulder a little bit. Maybe one of the best things, or one of the most important things that the mayor and council does is hire a qualified city manager. One of the most important things the city manager does is hire qualified expert staff. And so, like, it is, in some sense, our judgment to figure out what are the important things to present to council so that they can ultimately make informed decisions. Because it's not our community, it's theirs and yours, you know, so.
So I gotta follow up with that, and I'm sorry I'm not part of this, but I do have to follow up with this. When I became mayor, our number one thing was to get a full-time city manager. We went through a interview process, and with that, we hired Mr. Dossie. With that, he built a team around him. And it really, truly takes a team to lead this city forward. There were 5 department heads, major department heads, that were not filled. So he has hit the ground running along with good staff. So I want you to thank everyone that has given their heart and soul. And I know you guys, some of you hear me say heart, but their heart and soul to make this city run. So I think that the staff is doing an outstanding job in just 2.5 short years.
I'm gonna skip a bunch of them. Thank you, Mayor Burns,
Yes,
by the way,
yes.
appreciate that. I'm gonna skip a bunch to help out. Does the city make recommendations on water usage projects to Illinois American? Or does Illinois American say, these are the upgrades you need to make? Does the city request those upgrades? How does that work with a private utility?
Well, I'll start and then Justin can maybe speak, but yeah, so we don't make any decisions related to the water system. The sewer system is ultimately connected to the water system, right? But yeah, Illinois American, or, you know, potentially Groveland Township Water District or whoever else, they make decisions for their, you know, public utility system. If improvements are gonna be necessary for a project, that's generally between the water utility and the developer. It's something that we might talk about, right? And certainly, you know, when somebody requests a connection, Illinois American has their inspectors. Anytime somebody gets a plumbing permit in the city, it's gonna go through Nick. But, like, as far as, you know, Illinois American maybe saying we're gonna have to upgrade our treatment plant, that's between them and the developer.
Okay.
You got any, Justin?
American Water has a developer packet that, similar, the way a developer would walk through the process at the city, they're also walking through a different process at American Water.
Excellent. Last one, I appreciate the city's patience. In development projects that are newer to the general economy of the city of Pekin, right? We're learning as we go, doing those different things. How does the city handle these developments regarding fire codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes, maybe codes that haven't even been considered? A good example of that would be now electrical codes require AFCIs in bedrooms. That didn't exist 10 years ago. GFCIs didn't exist 20 years ago near water sources. So how does the city approach that when we're dealing with potential development projects that are only 2, 4, 6 years old and the codes haven't been written?
So I'm gonna ask Nick to talk a little bit about like the International Code Council. One anecdote that I think applies, we don't do things necessarily in a vacuum. Justin knows a lot of other engineers. Nick knows a lot of other professionals in the construction industry. I know other people that work in different municipalities around the country or around the state dealing with stuff. If there's something that we come across that like we had never seen before, or a piece of a development that when Nick's doing a review, he's not super familiar with, we don't pretend to know things that we don't know. So we, especially on, when it comes to building and engineering reviews and inspections, we make sure that the right people are looking at stuff if it's not us. Anecdotally, Nick is one of the most informed people in the state about public water systems and plumbing. People will call him or in different areas and ask him questions that under his expertise. So like that does happen. I don't know if you want to talk about how the I-codes come together, give people some context about how those are created and updated.
Yeah, so as some of you may know, the I-codes, are on a 3-year cycle. The city is currently looking at updating to the most current cycle, which is the 24 I-codes. Within those 3 years, there's committees that get together and they discuss how the code's working, if there's any changes that need to be added. And again, every 3 years they're updated. So anytime we run into something that we don't understand, we have the resources to reach out to ICC or a third party to help navigate a set of plans. We're currently working on a project in the floodway, and we've had to discuss this project with an outside firm as well. So we utilize all resources that we can.
Thank you very much.
Next question.
I have a question, I don't need a mic.
Okay.
You're welcome. Anytime you wanna make a zoning or change to your property, always have to go to the zoning board. And all the neighbors get a notification that this is gonna happen.
Correct.
Now, I own about a quarter of a mile of property up against this property, and I've never heard a word from you guys. Why
Yes.
is that? What makes you different than the county?
The property has not been rezoned. That's the thing.
No, right. But when you're in the county and you want to change something on your property, you have to go to the zoning board.
Right.
Okay, it sounds to me like you guys are trying to change something, but you're not concerned about the neighbors.
So again, the property that was annexed, there was public notice of that. And if a developer or the city or anybody wants to rezone that property, right, it's part of it is in estate zoning already because it was already annexed. The part up closer to 98 was recently annexed. It's ag, it defaults into whatever it was in the county, right? So right now it's default ag. If anybody wanted to rezone any portion of that, they would have to follow the zoning procedures that, Nick laid out an example of one of those process flows. And there would be 15 to 30 days of public notice of the hearing, properties within 150 feet, get a letter. Like that all still will, assuming the data center project goes forward and there is a rezoning, that process will happen. It's just not happening yet because they're just not ready to petition for anything.
So does that zoning change come under the special uses?
No.
What exactly do you consider a special use?
Let me just pull up the code again. Each zoning district has different special uses. So in our B1, B2, B3, same way in our industrial, there's different special uses. So, what may be a special use in a B1 would end up becoming a principal use in a B3, okay?
So in the city code, there's a zoning chapter. It's got all the different districts, agricultural, residential, and then under the other, Nick spoke to some of those. For example, if we click on the B1, permitted uses, give it a minute. So there is a list right there, 1 through whatever, of these are principal uses that are by right allowed to be done. So they don't need any special approval. In the B1, you can open up a dry cleaning establishment with no special approval. If you scroll down, you go to special uses, there's a list of special uses that require special consideration. They're gonna require a site plan, they're gonna require the council to vote.
Typically, other special conditions as well, setbacks and
Yeah.
fencing is a lot of times required.
So I mean, if people are curious or concerned about what the zoning is going to potentially be for a data center, the city code has as a principal use in the B3 and the I1, so business 3, industrial 1, and industrial 2. Data centers are allowed as a principal use in just those districts. So again, if a developer were to petition for B3 zoning, only the B3 stuff would be allowed if approved, and it would require that public notice and notice to the neighbors and all that kind of stuff.
Could you repeat what was the distance that you would notify neighbors of?
150 feet.
And I think that that's one of the problems, is that things are changing, and to say 150 feet, that's really absurd, because people, at a minimum, I mean, we know it's 3 miles, but at a minimum, people within 1 mile would be severely impacted, and to only notify people that were in 150 feet would really be a miscarriage of justice, to say the least.
Yeah, so the concern is that 150 feet's not enough, basically, for the particular projects in question. We don't change the code based on what the project is. The law is the law, and it applies equally to everybody. Certainly, people that are outside of that 150 feet are welcome to come to hearings, right? Is it still required to be published in the paper? So yeah, so hearings are still required to be published in the paper. They are on agenda.
Newspaper.
Which newspaper?
They don't have them anymore. I mean,
Here,
it's not
we,
like 20 years ago
No.
where you get a paper every day.
That was my question when I had my hand up is, you know what? I'm an abate member of the legislative POTAS, and we're downsizing because of money. We're downsizing our monthly newsletter. And the biggest thing from the state level of the organization down to the ground grassroots is everybody's doing away because everybody's got one of these or everybody's got one of those.
so.
I came up here in 2016 and I put up a mailbox next to my mom's for the newspaper. Pekin Times doesn't exist anymore, and you got that hometown little thing, Well, I was fixing to ask this gentleman here, whose property is gonna be right up against that if you allow this monstrosity. Have you gotten any kind of
Not a
notice?
word.
Well, the last 2 board meetings I
I
know.
can't get anybody to answer my phone calls either.
The last 2 board meetings that I know of, or as I understand, have been canceled, so there hasn't been any, and the one lady said at the city council meeting last month, spot zoning is illegal in the state of Illinois. So, I grew up out in, hold up. I grew up out in that area, and I'm gonna tell you, for those of you that didn't grow up in this town, since 1969, my mom and dad's property have been out there, and I've never seen an eagle, because we're all part of the DDT poison age. Now, I've got a gentleman who was at last meeting, told me the eagle that I see at 4 o'clock in the afternoon fly over my farm field, I've been trying to figure out where the hell his nest is, and he says it's right down next to our pond. So, this is all in the back side of this. Got a lady and a gentleman here who at one meeting said they like to hear the coyotes sing at night. I grew up in this area since I was 4 years old out there on that property, never saw a coyote, not one. We never had to worry about that. You get out on Sheridan Road, we used to take cinder blocks and put boards on them and take our bicycles and jump the ramps. The gentleman had a sign put out there by his house. There's 999 people that go towards Morton in the morning and 1,000 to come back down that road every night. And you can't get kids out there to be safe, because there's no kids out there on that main road on Sheridan Road, and there's people doing 70 miles an hour on that straightaway. You're talking about advancing this town. Shoot, we've got stuff that's out there that nobody wants you to tear up or destroy. And if you haven't seen a data center that's gonna take up 1,000 square acres, last 30 years up until 2016, I was living in El Paso, Texas, thanks to the U.S. Army. Well, my daughter just told me that they've got one that's getting ready to come online, and it was supposed to be run by natural gas generators, and that lady got all uptight because it's gonna be fossil fuel generators, and they're gonna have to do $12.7 million just to upgrade one small section of El Paso Electric. Now, we got Powerton that's fixing to shut down. They've already shut Edwards down. Where's this energy gonna come from? I was a generator mechanic in the Army for 10 years. When they fire up 20 of them diesel generators,
Yes,
you're gonna have a
sir.
2.1 just once a month, and most of the data centers
Yes, sir.
do it at night.
And in rotation, they do it all month long in rotation.
That will cause a 2.1 vibration on the Richter scale across half a mile of that area outside of that data center.
Ask Bastrop, Texas.
Now, from what I've seen and what I know, the people in this state, in 1969, a man went to the Supreme Court of the state of Illinois. It is against the Constitution, it's unconstitutional to put a helmet on anybody's head in here. And last 3 years, we still got politicians that are trying to draft a law. I can't get anybody to come to a meeting. If I could get this many bikers to come to a meeting, I'd really just, shoo. But let me tell you, start talking about putting a helmet on their head, and they've been coming out in droves. I haven't been to a city council meeting where there was this many people, and at 5:30 when I walked into that one in January, I couldn't get near the door. Well, you're gonna have a town hall meeting on the 24th. I grew up in this town. Nobody does anything this size unless they're really trying to get your attention. So even talking about this any further, and the one gentleman that I saw last night say on the record, we don't want it, I'm not gonna vote for it, sitting on the council, that's the first red flag that you guys should be really looking at. Because you know what? Mayor, I don't know where you're from, never heard your name before until you started running for mayor, but you know what? My
I've been
dad
here-
did 30 years in
I've
Caterpillar.
been here 52 years. I'm originally from Missouri. I've been here 52 years.
In
My whole-
Pekin?
In Pekin. Mhm.
Wow.
My whole
When'd you
family is
graduate?
here. Pardon me?
When'd you graduate?
I graduated in Missouri in 1974.
I graduated from Pekin Community High School in 1984.
Nick, where'd you grow up?
Pekin.
Pekin.
Alright,
Yeah.
so,
I'm
So
very proud to
my-
be here
my-
for the last 52 years.
can I,
My
I'm gonna
point-
circle
my
back
point
to
is-
your
My
question.
grandkids are here.
We
My
do,
grandkids now have homes.
Well,
in
Kevin
the city of
Bresnahan
Pekin.
said it, and I know Kevin, I grew up with Kevin, I went to school with Kevin and his brothers. Let's start thinking about taking care of the land, because there's coyotes, and there's eagles, and there's turtles, and there's bees, and that whole Lugan's Lake area.
I have it all in my house too, and I live right
Well,
in the
that
center of
Lugan's Lake
Pekin.
area, we used to sneak up there and go fishing at night off the dam.
Pardon me?
So, Mayor, I'm gonna go back to
We
the
need to get
question
back
that was
on- I
asked.
know.
The question
Goodness sakes.
asked is where or when this was published in the paper, so I'm gonna let Nick continue. We got a little off track there, but let's stay on the topic. Thanks.
okay, so 15 days before any zoning board hearing, we publish in the Peoria Journal-Star, in the legal notice, as well as we put notice at City Hall and the city website of that hearing, as well as all cases that will be heard at that hearing. And the zoning board meetings for this year have been canceled because we have not had any cases. So that means no applications have came in for any type of special use, rezoning, or variances.
Question, is that 15 days consecutively, or is that 15 days once, and 15 days prior?
Consecutive.
Consecutive, thank
Yep.
you.
Just to make sure I understand, zoning board doesn't meet if there's no reason to meet, is that?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
I just,
Yep.
I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, so I appreciate that.
And it's the same thing
Same
like with
thing.
liquor commission too.
Okay.
If we don't meet unless there's something to talk about.
What's the city's capability to actually enforce, the codes and permitting? Because as you mentioned, there's like precedent where these companies are building first and asking for forgiveness later. Most famously with XAI. And like you said, there's already been issues around Pekin with enforcing, codes and permits and such. So I was just wondering what's the capability of that?
So you're asking if somebody was to start building before permission was granted?
I'm asking if they're going outside of already established codes and permits, say that the project go through.
Like what's happening in Aurora. Right now, the
Yeah.
people are really suffering in Aurora because they're not even meeting the basic bare minimums. They're just blowing past everything and the people are really suffering.
I think, yeah, I'll take a stab, I'll just get in trouble.
I already did,
I'll
go for it.
I think what you're asking is, are contractors are doing things, so yeah, the answer is yes, are there contractors doing work without pulling the permits and the things they're required to do? Sure, and in Nick's department, as well as the code enforcement department, they do enforce that. You know, are they coming out and they're putting on a new roof without pulling the proper permits? Are they coming out and doing plumbing work without pulling proper permits? Yes, and we could support that we have enforced that. But if you're asking, are they coming in and are they taking that flat piece of ground and digging and building something without our knowledge? I would like to think we're a little bit more observant. That's how I'm understanding what you're asking.
What I'm asking is, say this project goes into motion, they can do essentially whatever they want because they hold the purse, right? And everything, well.
I'll
there's
let Nick
there's
talk
been
about that a
instances
little bit more,
where-
and I will tell you.
I mean, like in Tennessee and Memphis, they have methane
Yeah.
turbines that they didn't pull permits for, and then,
Oh my.
while everything is getting negotiated out and fined out, and they're, you know, the city's issuing their fines and everything, people are breathing that in, and it's actually making people sick.
I will tell you, just from the complaints that have been generated, Nick shuts things down or shuts projects down if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing here. Because I get the complaints, if they start to go there. They've actually had to spend tens of thousands of dollars to remediate an issue where they did something that wasn't to code. And you know, probably one of the most recent things was an ADA issue that I recollect that I had to address where they had to pull everything back out and redo it correctly to suit the ADA compliance. So I would say he's pretty up on that. I'll have you speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah. Again, from the building code side of things, you know, if they start building something that's outside of the scope of the approved plans, we would immediately post a stop work order and, you know, potentially issue citations and then get with our legal department to figure out the next course of action.
I have a question about development
Can I just have one
tactics.
more, I'm sorry, can I have just one more comment? So,
Yes.
as you can tell, this is like a really long, complicated process, right? But at each phase, there's,
Always is.
you know, a review to make sure everything is compliant. But if at the end, something is built, or it's close to being built, or it's in the process of, you know, being built, and we find out that actually they're not abiding by what's in the contract, what's in the agreement, then we would definitely get involved and stop the project, right? Because, and there's provisions in there, right, that talk about the contingencies, that talk about the consequences if they don't follow exactly the site plans that have been approved, they don't follow every provision in the contract, so there's always a constant oversight throughout the whole process, but if it does turn out that they're not doing what they said they're gonna do the way they agreed to do it, then that's a problem and the city would get involved.
Okay, ADA ramps, if I may please, the ADA ramps, they installed ADA ramps on, Park Avenue in my local area, and they're installed below grade. So when it rains, those ramps actually flood and become inaccessible. And during the winter, they not only flood, but they freeze, becoming inaccessible. There's an ADA ramp in front of the post office when the school kids are getting out of school and it's submersed with water. The kids are having to walk out into the streets to get around and just cross the street. So is there a due diligence of checking to see that these things are actually being done correctly?
So I think there's two things there. One, on the ADA ramps, what I'd say to that is, can you reach out to the engineering department with those specific locations? And that's probably a better one-on-one discussion when we can actually look at the locations. I'm not familiar with the two spots you're talking, just off the top of my head. I know the area, but I don't know the ramps. But yeah, so for inspection, and the city has continued to improve, right? Like Josh and Nick both mentioned it, right? We are trying to do things, maybe not everything was done correctly, and we're continuing to make improvements as we kind of lessons learned. So that process on reviewing ramps has gotten better and better, and you know, we have staff internal that does that. We have a really good engineering technician that's you know, quite an expert on ADA. And then we also have a third-party consultant that reviews all the ramps that we install.
Okay, and do you have a name that I'm supposed to contact?
So you can, Joe, if you reach out to Joe Huffnagel, he's the city's ADA coordinator, and he's that technician that I mentioned.
And that's on he's on the website under the ADA portal. His name's on there as the coordinator, his number, so you can
Just
reach out to him.
remember Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of development, please, the question here is, how much force do you think you really have against a national developer that does this professionally? We're talking about someone that does this all over the country. This is their business, and you're trusting them. I don't. I've been a developer, I understand what their advantages are. If you really go look throughout the country, Texas is huge on these plants. They stomped over Bastrop, Texas, and Elon did this and ignored all the things that he said he was gonna do. He kept extending his permits, kept the whole thing going until it was running, and then he paid his fines.
Yeah.
Now, what are you gonna do to stop something that's steamrolling you? Because these guys got money. You spent $400,000 last year in legal fees, roughly. That's nothing to a $5 billion project. That's nothing. The $50,000 retainer you have, that means nothing. They could throw 10 out of there. If one sticks, they made money. They lose 500,000, it means nothing. You're playing in their game. That's what you don't understand. You need to get ready to be taken to task.
So I'm gonna, I guess, just respond to that briefly. We don't trust them, and I don't mean to say that we distrust them, but what I mean is we never just trust that somebody's gonna do something that they say. That's why we have levels of plan review and inspections. That's why we have, throughout the development process, it's not just it gets approved, it gets built, and it gets inspected. It gets approved, they pour a foundation, that gets inspected. The next step, they build a structure, and you know the framing gets inspected. The electrical gets put in, that gets inspected. If at any point in that process something's not going well, Nick issues a stop work order permit. If they continue to work without it, Amalia files I don't know, an injunction, is that the right term? An injunction in Tazewell County Court, right? It's not like it goes to DC or New York City or something, right? Tazewell County Court judges would be reviewing this stuff with Tazewell County voters and Tazewell County residents, you know. So like, I'm not saying we distrust any developer, but we don't just trust them to do the right thing. We have clawbacks in real estate agreements, we have contingencies, we do all of these things to protect the interest of the public. I said I was gonna be brief, so I guess I'll just stop there.
One comment.
I actually just have kind of a tack-on question about the ADA compliance to the ramps. Does the city of Pekin have plans or have an app for rapid reporting of these kinds of issues?
So we have a transition plan that's posted on the website, and then we also have a place to make ADA accommodation requests for specific
And
sidewalks.
would that apply just to general maintenance and repairs for around Pekin? You know, big potholes, burnout streetlights?
Oh, yeah, so there's a app, it's called Text My Gov. If you go to our website, you can sign up on there, and that explains, you can report through that as well. But as far as like reporting on the sidewalks, so everybody knows there's a consent decree. I mean, we hear about it at the council meetings where we're at in the process. We're following that consent decree. You could call Joe, let him know. Now, you need to understand, easy way to kind of explain it is, look at a medical triage. You're gonna have different severity, different levels of you know, patients that might come in. Same thing with this. There's, I forget how many, there was over 7,000 trip hazards reported. Some are more critical than others. They go through, some are simple where they can grind them down and make them compliant. They work on those. So there's different levels of where that's at. So depending on where it's at, and we do budget a a set amount of dollars that we're mandated to set aside for sidewalk repair, as well as we go above and beyond that. We're in the budget for the next fiscal year, so we're planning for that. But that is one of our top priorities, and some of the things, and to the, I think you were asking about the sidewalk up by the post office and stuff. They may not nobody may have reported those, and they may not be out there. So to his point is, let Joe know so we can go take a look at those, because there's a lot of sidewalk miles in Pekin, and there's a lot of not sidewalk miles in Pekin that fell in from the past, and we're paying for those sins of the past that we need to go back. Some of it's going to be reaching out to homeowners and hold their feet to the fire, and you're going to have to connect the sidewalks and do the things we should have made them do back in the day. So, to that point, those are things that are in process and work, but there's only so much money that I could put into that concrete, and then also work on roads and other infrastructure things that are out there. So we only get so much money every year. We try to apply to all the different things and prioritize what's more important, if that all makes sense.
The young lady in front of this gentleman. My concern is, it's a small community here. Are you guys gonna be capable of taking care of the legal fees that these people are gonna generate for you? They can totally sink this community.
Absolutely.
So there's different things that apply with us. So we do have legal that's on retainer, and that we use for like the development and those things. We're also members of the Illinois Municipal League, and they provide a lot of our legal. So if, say, we get sued, it goes through our insurance carrier, and they provide the legal for that. And we already pay for that as part of our membership and our dues for our insurance. Several of those things. Now, if we sue somebody, we would pay for that, but typically, you have to keep in mind, with every lawsuit, if you're the prevailing person or you're the prevailing side, typically, your legal fees get covered by the other party. That's been my experience. And, to your point, yeah, we've dealt with billion-dollar contractors and things like that. You can never say never. The laws can go either way, and we all realize that. But if you have a good, solid foundation built on your case, and you have the policies, and you have the documentation in there, and the steps you've taken, typically you succeed on that. And I'll let, Amalia go a little further.
Yeah, so one other point I wanted to make is, we can also have provisions in contracts with developers or with whomever that if there is a dispute about a breach of contract or any other issue, we could go to arbitration, which is much less expensive. It's like mediation, so you're out of the court system and you get an outcome much faster than you would through the regular court system. All that to say is there's all these like checks and balances, right? Like there's ways to lower expenses and to limit exposure for the city.
I have a quick zoning question. If something is zoned I-1, B2, B3, residential 1, anything that's inside the city limits would still be required to meet chapter 6 of all of our offenses, right? They would be under that governing. So for instance, if like offenses involving public order, whatever as I read the zoning code, there's nothing that would preclude them or exclude them from following chapter 6 of the offenses of the city of Pekin. Do I understand that correct, or is that incorrect?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure, regardless of what it's zoned, right?
Yeah, so regardless of zoning, the rest of the city code still applies. If there's a situation for whatever reason, two parts of the code are in conflict, or there's an ordinance that's in conflict, the more stringent requirement applies. Like the more stringent, the more specific and the more stringent requirement applies. So, if there's a provision that says, I'm just making something up, right? But if there's a provision over here that says that if you're next to a residential district, a fence has to be, 20 feet high, and then over here it says you don't have to have a fence at all for any development, well, like this one's more specific, this one's more stringent, you have to follow this one.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Diana.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw an idea out there, because we've been in the area out there for 66 years. And aside from all the health implications with a data center, The other part is the land. And that land is gonna be cleared, leveled, blah, blah, blah. And so even though you can stop a project, if they do something wrong, the land is gone.
Yeah.
It's
So-
ruined.
So, and Amali can speak to this too, again, in development agreements, it is quite often the case that should a project be abandoned, you have a surety bond of some kind that the city has the sole access to be able to go to that bank or whatever it is and say, hey, they defaulted on their contract, we therefore get to access that $10 million to remediate the issue. Like that's extremely common, and especially if somebody's building public sewer main, public road, whatever, we very often force them to put up the money it would take to do that entire project should they just walk away from it.
Those would cover our damages, so to speak.
But you can't rebuild
You
a
can't put the-
100-year-old oak tree, it's not gonna
No,
come
that's
back.
fair, like, yeah, if an old, you know, if an oak tree comes down, you know, it's not gonna be able to be put back up.
Exactly.
And I guess another thing that, it's maybe just a small point, but I think some people assume that, again, the data center project is like right next to the lake. It's not right next to the lake. It's the vast majority of the area that it is proposed to go towards is an agricultural field, right? You know, the farmer's been farming it for years. And I would just add, like, regardless of whether the data center goes through or not, the city's goal is to increase economic opportunity and development for the community. So if it's not gonna be that, something else is probably gonna get built out there. And that's a policy decision. That's not for the staff to decide what actually gets built out there. But something is gonna get built. Like
Okay,
it's.
This is considered an industrial development. This is not an industrial area. Please put this in an industrial area that we've already established. This is not an industrial area. It doesn't fit the area. That's what you
Again,
must pay attention to.
No zoning's been approved, no site plan has been approved, council has not taken a vote to change anything to industrial or commercial or whatever. If that moves forward, there will be hearings, there will be all of that. Let's try to stick to the topic of just development procedures.
Stand up.
So,
Well, no, it's just, I wanted them to know that you're next.
so just a quick question, kind of going back to, and I think it's more directed to Nick probably, but since the TIF has been expanded for new construction homes out Sheridan Road and that, I live in Ludekin's Cove, there's been a flurry of lots being built on more recently. So there's a land covenant, there's multiple land covenants out there in that area. How do you ensure that the construction is abiding and that homeowner now that's buying it, it's abiding to those land covenants? Because there's homes that are being built right now that are kind of in conflict with what those land covenants say.
So the questions about land covenants, this is a great topic, it's not something that we covered, but it's absolutely part of the development process, especially a residential development process. A land covenant is like a separate recorded document where normally a developer says, above and beyond the city code, I want this area to have certain standards, and those might be architectural construction standards, they could be a lot of stuff. The city does not have the ability, we don't have the legal authority to necessarily enforce land covenants. There's some exceptions, right? The Riverway Business Park, there used to be a set of land covenants in that business park, and the city was the majority owner of property down there. So we would have the ability as property owners to go after somebody that wasn't following those land covenants. That's a pretty uncommon example. For example, out at Ludekin's Cove and the other subdivisions in that area, land covenants exist. The city does not have the ability to necessarily enforce them. Like Nick does not review building plans in accordance with those land covenants. What you can do, and what I would encourage you to do, is get with the other property owners, get that homeowners association or whatever your covenants call for established. You'd have an elected board, you'd have all these things. Then you can take action against that other property owner. And certainly, like a lot of land covenants will say, even if you've gotten a city permit, you still have to come before that HOA's architectural design committee or something before you build your house. And again, the city doesn't enforce that because it's a private deal. But you can take action against that other property owner if they're not following your land covenants. Is that fair, Amalia? All that?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
This gentleman over here.
I got a question in reference to you mentioned you observe, you research how long does that take on researching a place like a land or a subdivision, and what's that like? Do you go to another facility?
Yeah.
Do you get with your engineers? I mean, what's the research and time frame on that?
Yeah, so the research on a project, so I use the example of a residential development. So let's say one of the national builders, right? Lennar, D.R. Horton, whoever, wanted to come build a subdivision in Pekin. We would generally go through this process, and part of this process is to do the research that you're talking about, right? Like, we want to know about what kinds of homes do you want to build, what kinds of separation do you want between homes, is that going to meet our code? A lot of residential developers don't want to put sidewalks on both sides of the street. That's quite often a contention. So like we talk about those things ahead of time. That initial meeting tells us a lot. And then as we go, as they submit a site plan, as they start submitting civil engineering plans, right? Because developers, again, like to move through procedures as best they can. So they might submit engineering plans for review before council approves something, and that's fine. If council denies it, they've maybe wasted money submitting plans, but that's on them. So the process for reviewing something, yes, if it's, if the mayor wants to know what kind of homes are they gonna be built, we say, hey, where'd you build? They say, oh, Sugar Grove, Illinois, and we might go, see what homes they've built.
Let's talk like industrial though, not just subdivisions, like
Sure.
something like everybody's here.
Sure,
for.
yeah.
So like, how does that, do you go and see a site,
Yeah.
what the pros and cons are about, and because we're seeing it in our subdivision, and
Yeah.
I'm still learning, that's why I'm here tonight.
Yeah,
We got so much fighting going on in our own subdivision. This guy, there's signs going up, we're in our subdivision, and I'm lost, and so I can't talk to this guy or this guy, because they're both fighting.
Sure.
So, and I don't know what to say, so I'm like, what's it gonna do, this is gonna do, so I start doing my own research on it, and they're like, well, that AI doesn't know anything, and so,
Yeah,
what's the research
something
that
more
you're doing
complicated.
to?
I'll just use a data center as an example, okay? So what do we do? So several of us have gone up to the one in DeKalb, seen it. There's other ones around. There's a couple in Peoria right now. They're small scale, for CAD or Pearl Technology has one or two. So we can go look at those things. We have wanted to try to give the public as much information as we can. The problem is right now, we just don't know what this project is going to be. So for us to say, oh, it's gonna have whatever kind of water system, oh, it's gonna have whatever power level, oh, like we can assume things, we can say most data centers do this, we just don't know. So I've been a proponent from the staff saying, let's not put information out there that we don't know. So you can blame me for the lack of information, I guess, because I don't want us to be putting something out there and then be called liars because this is what we thought and it turned out to be wrong. So again, once a developer comes to the point where they're ready to start submitting things and we get details about a project and we know, okay, this is the type of water system, Illinois American or like, have you seen this before? When they say, here's the fire suppression system we're gonna have internally. Okay, Nick and Fire Marshal, are you familiar with that? Do we need to go check it out? Like, that process will happen. It is taking an extended amount of time in this particular case, because it's a huge project, right? I mean, I'm trying to give context to people, the commercial renovation of the existing Bob Evans into a Chipotle was a year-long process. Like, just to change over a restaurant. Like, the process for doing a residential subdivision or a manufacturing plant or a data center, like, multiple years worth of study and review. Everybody thinks things just happen like that, and it just takes so much time.
How long have we been dealing
The
with
residential
Epic?
site that Nick presented up here, that's been
Almost a year and a half?
almost 2 years.
What
And-
about Epic? How long have we been dealing with Epic?
Yeah, I mean, Epic first came to us a year ago, right? And now they're just starting to talk about submitting building plans and engineering plans this month, next month.
Yeah.
So like,
What if someone puts money down on a land that you approve, then what?
well, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, if they're wanting to buy this property and then they're
Sure.
gonna send you details, then what?
So,
You approve the land and then they come and then how do you stop that?
Yeah,
okay, yeah, they have they have an option agreement essentially, right? It's a real estate agreement, so they've got $50,000 down in escrow. They have not purchased the property, they haven't taken title to it, the actual sale is contingent upon all these things. So like, yes, technically a community, that owned land could just sell off a piece of property to somebody not knowing what they're gonna do with it. Pekin, at least since I've been here, like, they've not done that. And that is not what's happened in this case. So that could be theoretically a concern, but I would say it's not one right now.
Yes.
I don't know whose hand.
The first, go ahead, no, go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
The very first slide that you put up there at the beginning, where exactly is this proposed data center
Yeah.
project at?
So the data center proposal is here. There is a real estate agreement, a contingent real estate agreement that is approved, and nothing else has even been negotiated or anything like that. Council has not had any agenda items on it. Like we have had initial discussions. The big thing that they're taking all the time on is with Ameren, right? Because they've got a big power need. I don't know how much of a power need, but they've got a big power need. And Ameren is the one that has to deal with that and ultimately say, yes, we can, with our infrastructure support this, or no, we can't. And, the state might pass energy laws, who knows what the state's gonna do. But like, this has been done, the city approved an option agreement contingent upon certain things, that's where it's at. So there is all of that rest of that still would have to come if it were moving forward.
Have they met any of those contingencies yet?
No, other than signing the agreement, they have not done anything else with the city yet. I check in with them maybe once a month, and basically we don't have an update right now. So that's where we're at. Go ahead.
I have two questions, and I think this has probably already been answered in the meeting. But did Western Hospitality Partners approach Pekin? Did they seek Pekin out?
We were introduced to them via attorneys who knew each other. So their attorney knew one of our attorneys, not Amalia. Their attorney knew one of our attorneys.
Who?
James Vaselli, right? Their attorney knows from that world, the legal world, knew one of them. Jim asked us like, hey, do you want to meet these people? And
You don't think that's a conflict of interest?
well, why would it be? I mean, if we are
That's a
seeking,
conflict of interest, because this is definitely not in the community's interest, and you have an attorney who is connected to them, that's really
well, our attorney knows a lot of people. Like I know a lot of people.
It's very
Justin knows a lot of
disappointing.
people. Molly knows a lot of people.
So in Josh's presentation at the beginning, he talked about how there could be people who approach the city, right? And so in this case, it happened to be the village attorney or city attorney, James Vaselli, who knew an attorney who represented, I don't know if it's directly the developers, but that's how, and that's not unusual. I mean, especially
It might not be unusual, but it's making my blood boil, I'm telling you right now, that is absurd.
Well, so let me just ask then, like, what, if not just initial conversation, like, how do we get in touch with anybody for any development if it's not like, hey,
I wouldn't expect it to be through the attorney that's supposed to be representing the town, that is for sure.
well, would it be
Right.
through me, who also represents the town?
I feel like I would prefer you to the attorney.
Okay.
But
and
he
it's
still
not-
works for the city.
Right, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
but he's
not
not
an
an attorney.
And that attorney
Well,
works for the city.
And as an attorney, there's a fiduciary duty obligation to represent your client and your
Yes.
client's interests. So in that case, that's what James does, that's what we all do as attorneys. So, all that to say that there's not a conflict for him or for really anybody from the staff taking in information about potential projects. This is in a really early stage, and I'm glad there's so much interest because we definitely want to answer all the questions and be transparent. At the same time, we don't have a lot of information as well directly from the developer, right? So, we don't want to present information that we don't have.
Right here. I have my second question.
I'm sorry.
Actually, it's kind of a statement, kind of a question. So you said that whenever projects come up, you check them out, you inspect them every step of the way. You make sure once they lay their concrete, you make sure it was done right as the project goes on. But yet we have ADA sidewalks that were done within the past 2 years, and something as simple as that was done wrong. Where was the oversight? How can we trust you with something this big?
How long have you stepped in as our engineer?
Can you point to a couple of examples of sidewalks that have been done incorrectly in the last 2 years?
Yeah, she just brought it up, where you told her to contact the city manager.
you're leaving it up to the.
Yeah, but that wasn't, that's something that's something that was existing.
No, within the past 2 years.
No, it's not something that was just installed by the city the past 2 years. She's pointing out something that's been there for some time, we just haven't been aware of. There's miles and miles of sidewalks in this city. We don't know where every broken sidewalk is necessarily at.
Okay,
And
when
how about
Lake Iron Park, the children's park, was updated, the ADA sidewalks accommodations were installed at that point.
And that was before you stepped in.
Yes, but so there is a challenge here, that an ADA sidewalk does have slopes that it needs to meet, right? And so you can end up with where sidewalks are put in compliantly, but because of the very shallow slopes that are required to meet compliance, it doesn't shed water very well. So I agree that that can be an issue, but you're balancing, you know, the desire to shed water, which is why a lot of sidewalks prior were maybe put in at 4%, right? Because that sheds water really quickly and keeps the water moving. But we have, under the modern ProAg standard, which is what we use for setting all the slopes and the elevations for sidewalks, it is significantly flatter than that. And so, you know, if you go to, say, a 1% versus a 4%, you know, water is going to move much slower through there. So I agree that, you know, if you get a significant rainfall through a compliant sidewalk, you can end up with water where it doesn't move as quickly as it would if it were non-compliant.
Right, this lady right here. Weren't you next?
Yes.
Yes.
You said, somewhere along this with your, discovery, that this was all in your minds for the benefit of Pekin. And I think these people would say that they are Pekin. And this group is saying this is not beneficial for us. How many people does it take to get you to take this project off the table?
Okay, again,
First of all-
we're not here to discuss the merits of the data center project.
I'm just asking, how many people does it take?
So,
for you to-
understand, we aren't the decision makers on this. We're the staff,
I'm one of them.
we are the
I'm
ones
here before
who
you.
do the work. That's a council decision when that time comes. And our job is we put the information together, we provide them as much information as we can so they can make an informed decision on what's the next step. Do we kill it? Do we move on? Where do we need to go?
Isn't this all part of the information that
It
you
is part,
shared?
you're 100% right,
Then why did you
absolutely.
accept the option to begin with?
Pardon me?
Why did you accept the option to begin with?
It was brought, you know what, like I said, it is our job. It was brought to us.
And I get
Doesn't mean
that.
Yeah,
you
it
accept
was
it.
brought to
I
us.
get
Now
that,
we've
but
got
we
to,
say
now
no.
we've got to
The
study.
data center
All
conversation
these
is
people
next
that are
month.
against it and people that are
Not
for it, the
tonight,
people
it's
that are
next
for it
month.
have not come forward. But
They
we've
don't
got
come
to.
forward. Show us people that are forward.
Mayor, let's,
Yeah.
our topic tonight are the processes, so this is more appropriate for March 24th.
Thanks for your time.
You are so welcome.
I was next, I think.
Yeah, you were next.
Earlier, Josh made the comment that they don't really trust the developer, but they have a way out. Now, do you think that these people really trust you, Mary? And what clawback do we have? If it goes through, what clawback do we have?
We do.
Other than the election?
Go for it.
So,
Then it's too late.
so on the real estate agreement that's been approved,
I'm talking about trust. That's, you said you didn't necessarily trust that developer, but you have an out. What out do we have? Because I don't think too many people trust you guys.
Trust the process.
I guess maybe I might be misunderstanding, so correct me if my answer is not speaking to your question. So the city council still has multiple approvals before a project can be built. The real estate agreement was to basically get the developer to say, yes, the developer will start investing dollars into Ameren's power study, other engineering studies to figure out from their end if it's a feasible project. So as far as not trusting or not trusting, again, I'm not saying we trust or don't trust them, I'm saying the trust is irrelevant. What we have,
Earlier, you said, we really don't trust them until we know. but we've been around this thing long enough to know that I don't think we trust you. But what drawback, clawback do we have?
When you say we, do you mean the
The
city?
people,
Or
the people that it affects the most.
Okay, yes, so in the United States form of government, you have an election. That is your ability to remove people from office. Yeah, that's the
So
city.
we are, you know, I'm not gonna use that mic. I think everybody can hear me. We really are, and I know people hate hearing due diligence, but studying, whatever word you wanna call it. We really are listening to you. We really are gathering information. And I'm trying to listen to the pros, listen to the cons, what is going to be best for our city. You know, I've heard everything from, death threats to, yes, to, you know, kill it, to move forward. We really, really are trying to study. Now, people criticize me because I said I speak from the heart. I do. That's emotional. That is, I feel your pain, but I also feel the pain of the city. I want to grow this city. If this is not the right way, we won't grow it this way. But we've got to bring revenue in the right way instead of taxing. So we have to bring revenue in the right way, and we're trying. We're trying.
You wanna pick somebody else?
Okay, who's next?
Maddie's been next for a while.
Yes, she has. Go for it.
Hello, my name is Madison. Thank you for meeting with the majority of the public today. I had what could be considered a few different questions, but I'll start with this one. Can the city entertain ideas from developers for the same property at the same time? And I understand if one developer has a contract with the city, that contract might then prevent the city from entertaining another idea from a developer for the same property, because I could see how that wouldn't work. But is it possible for the city to actually look at an option B for a property while still in discussion with developer who is considered option A?
Yes, so great question. Basically, if the city's under contract under a piece of land, can we entertain other ideas? I'm gonna give you two answers. Yes, absolutely, I can talk with anybody I want. Like, I can have a conversation with any other developer that I want about what we might use that property for. I'm always transparent with anybody I talk to. Hey, we currently have a real estate agreement, nothing else has been approved yet, or there's another option agreement for, in the industrial park, somebody has got another year left on an option to make a purchase there. I have talked to other industrial companies about that property should it become available again. The city council would not be able to enter into a different real estate agreement for the same piece of property. So I wouldn't be bringing anything to council for a formal vote or consideration while we're under contract, but certainly, I'm always trying to figure out what's the backup plan because honestly, if I have 100 contacts, one of them might come through or two of them might be interested, and then, it might not work out at all. So I'm always trying to come up with a backup plan.
I asked that question because it seems like, given how certain developments' due diligence period could take a year, 18 months, 2 or more years, you're almost delaying what could be a really viable option B because of a really poor option A, just because there's a contract in place.
Sure, yeah, and that's a real concern. I mean, I'll just say the other property that's in the industrial park, right, that's a 47 acre site that we have had under an option for a year now, and they've got another year. They are making, because they wanted a 2-year option, we said, hey, that's a really long time. And that is a really prime, it's already got utilities, it's got road access, it's got other industrial, that is a serious prime site. So they're actually paying us a quarterly option payment to hold that option. It's we're generating a modest, but some revenue off them just holding the option. And then if they do purchase it, right, it's $1 million sale price. So yes, that is a particular concern, and you can deal with that in different ways, like option payments, or instead of entering into an option, you can enter into a first right of refusal, where they don't necessarily have the option to buy it, but if we're gonna sell it, you know, to this person for $1 million, we first have to offer it to them for $1 million, and they have to make a choice. So like, there's things you can do. In this particular case, you know, they put some money down to say, yes, in good faith, we're gonna move forward with this. I understand for a $5 billion project, 50,000 is not a lot of money, but like $50,000 is still money. So they put that down and are moving forward. So yeah, there's.
We have to take calculated risks. Dave?
Hi, I've got a couple questions here. One of my main questions is, I see how the property development works and all that, whether it's real estate or business, very familiar with a lot of it. How did we come about buying the 1,000 acres that we got entered into, that got us into this for the 14 million? What was the reasoning for that? First of all, that's one of my questions.
Good question.
Sure, so I'm gonna, I don't know how often people visit the city website. I'm always open to putting more stuff up here if you know, we're getting a lot of questions about the same topic. So the Ludekin property, right, 990 some odd acres, call it 1,000 acres. Let me just pull it up here. So we've got a page on the Ludekin property, right, we're marketing it. We have some FAQs. The city, you know, when I got here, the city had just started conversations with the prior owner. She had talked to off and on with the city for, I don't know, a couple decades.
25 years.
Different people at the city, different mayors, managers. The city had this plan for a long time to connect Veterans Drive up to the interstate. So that was the impetus for why the city started entertaining purchasing any property up in this area, was to connect Veterans Drive up to the interstate, again, to create development opportunity along a corridor. In those negotiations, or discussions I should say, like the months leading up to when I started with the city, the prior owner basically said, hey, I know you guys don't have final plans for where you're gonna put you think you wanna put this road, so we can't really do a deal right now. Would you be interested in just buying the entire site? That way you can do whatever you want with the road, utilities, all that kind of stuff. That's about the time that I entered the picture, so that's where I have the firsthand knowledge now. So if anybody else on the staff wants to talk about before that, go for it.
But with that, right after that, we got a $4 million.
Yeah. So right in conjunction with that, through Representative LaHood's initiatives, he was able to secure the city an 80% grant, so $4 million out of $5 million, a $4 million grant to engineer the Veterans Drive extension up to the interstate. And you know, once you get a grant, you only have a certain amount of time to be able to use it. So we're like, okay, let's do this deal. We had a deal with the owner to purchase the property over 4 years. So basically seller financing at 0% interest. We were gonna make installment payments, if you will, over the course of a few years before taking title to it. About 6 months after we entered into that purchase agreement is when we were introduced to the data center developer. So that is when that all kicked off, right? The data center development and the purchase of the property, absolutely unrelated. Once we realized, you know, after a few months of talking with the data center developer, like, this is a serious opportunity, we should actually consider this. Like, we don't often just say no to things unless there's, you know, some, whatever, we don't just often kill things right off the bat. So it's like, look, we can take this step, there's still plenty of approvals that have to happen, this is not in any way a final approval, but it lets them start moving forward, it lets us start moving forward. Then we accelerated the purchase of the Ludekin property to take title to it, to then be able to enter into a real estate agreement to sell about a third of it. So we had this plan to develop the property, we still have, for a road, we still have those plans. Justin works with, you know, Hanson Engineering, and we're going through IDOT reviews and all that kind of stuff right now. Phase 1 engineering, phase 2 engineering, all before you can do all that. So over several years, we're doing the engineering work for Veterans Drive to be connected. And then the rest of the property, the vision is the city, like, we are not a developer. We don't want to dictate specifically how every acre gets developed. We will have our general powers over zoning and land use. And certainly as the property owner, we can more easily dictate what the property gets used for, rather than just our general zoning powers. So like, that's another reason that maybe it's nice that the city does control it, because then we do have some say over what happens more so than if we didn't own it. But again, long-term, our goal is to build a road up to the interstate and then sell off the rest of the property to appropriate development. And ultimately, city council gets to decide what appropriate development means.
Okay, that's great, that's a great first part. The second part is IDOT works on 6-year plans, and I still see that IDOT has no 6-year plan with anything for the finishing of the ring road. Maybe you could answer why we would jump so far ahead of the horse, the cart, without the horse. We've got a lot of property, fire station properties that I'm very familiar with, numerous industrial areas. We've got a lot of property already in Pekin, and even the real estate guy, Gary Allen, I've talked to many real estate people, and they're like, we've got 10 to 12 years worth of property already for development. And I get it. If you got a great ice cream product and you're selling them, you buy more ice cream and you figure out how to make more money on it. But we're not even selling the property. We're not taking care of the stuff we have in Pekin. So my question is how do we get that far ahead of a road that isn't even on a 6-year plan with IDOT? That's my next part of the question.
I got a comment for that. In 1966 is when the ring road or veterans or whatever you want to call it started. So it has taken this long to get that far. Now IDOT already has land that is connected to 474. They in the plans you can see that they have exit in and an exit out. They already have that land. So they are planning on this road eventually getting there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, what I've got on the screen now is what Mary was just talking about. So, you can see this is an existing interchange right near the river. This whole big gray area right here is already platted by IDOT for an interchange. So, to say, certainly it's not on an IDOT 6-year plan, it's also not going to be an IDOT road construction project. It's going to be a city of Pekin in conjunction with other municipalities. Like, this is not gonna be a state road until it gets to the interstate. So IDOT is gonna mandate a lot of things about the interstate design. They're gonna mandate a lot of things about, how it crosses Highway 98. But other than that, it's not going to be an IDOT project.
Other than it is being designed to the federal standards that would allow us to then seek funding, similar to how we sought funding for the design.
So does a lot of the public realize that we still don't even own the rest of that property yet? That there's still another parcel next to where most people probably don't know there's 80 more acres between there. Would you like to be transparent about that?
We have.
Sure, it's not like hidden knowledge. So the Ludekin property was one large purchase that now the city controls about 70% of the distance between Sheridan Road and Interstate 474. So there's, the 80 acres on the north side of Sheridan Road, the north side of Highway 98, Edgewater, these two big parcels, the Gamblewood Farm, the city purchased that several years ago, 2020, 2021. We are actively in negotiation with some of the other landowners in that vicinity to finish the area needed. So there's, I'll say several, right? It's not 50, but there's several more parcels that we are gonna have to talk to private landowners about. But yeah, that process just takes time. And in order to acquire property when you're using federal funding, right after we did the Ludekin acquisition is when we got our grant award. Now we have to follow IDOT's requirements for land procurement every step of the way. Every parcel gets its own individual appraisal. If you change a little bit about what you're gonna buy, you get a new appraisal. There's very formal negotiation steps that you have to follow.
Is it right here? Right here?
Fair enough, that's why I wanted to make sure. I wasn't even sure that if we had that property or not. So that's what I wanted to make sure. And then my last question is what everybody's worried about is if we go in and tear up McNaughton Park and this gets done, how much money is something like that? How much can you possibly put on a retainer or a bond to justify that those park district properties don't get ripped apart from the wildlife? That's priceless, right?
So the McNaughton Park parcels are not gonna be a part of any of the road or any of the data center development.
I understand that, but I'm talking about from the impact of the data center possibly, or construction of it for 3 to 5 years. That could be very impactful.
Yeah, so again, it would be up to the park district if for whatever reason they needed to, go through the park district's property for anything, but generally, there's not gonna be any construction activity in McNaughton Park for any of this.
Yeah. And I don't think that the park district.
Construction site and see how long that drift is gonna go, because it will be in the park.
Yeah, I don't think that the park district would probably put up with too much as the head of the library district
And again-
decided to step in and
You know, you
take care
said
of it.
earlier that there was a company that wanted to come to Pekin and they wanted to do some kind of concrete work, but the people across the street were gonna get dust, so you shut it down. You shut that down because people were gonna get dust. But our parks that are right next to this, you don't think that they are going to be affected, and you're not considering that maybe you should shut this down?
So I would say the situation where, you know, they wanted to have outdoor processing of grinding concrete where legitimately a cloud of silica dust was gonna travel into a backyard was such an obvious situation that we knew city council's not even gonna wanna talk about this, that the staff politely said, thank you, but no thank you. In this situation, certainly I'm not gonna say there will or won't be impacts, okay? I'm not gonna say that right now. So certainly there could be. It's not a cloud of silica dust that's gonna travel into somebody's window. So like, it wasn't such an obvious thing that staff at our level decided it shouldn't move forward to city council.
This lady's next.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is, on my part, somewhat ignorance. I've been in this area my whole life, and I've heard about this ring road my whole life. I can understand when it first came up, the appeal to it. I'm trying to understand now, why do we want this ring road? I mean, just because there's a road doesn't mean people drive on it. If somebody's going down 474 and this exit is there, what's gonna draw them onto that ring road to come to Pekin? That's my first question. I know that might not be an easy answer, but that's a question I think a lot of people have. If you haven't, you can answer that before I go into my next.
Sure.
It's Pekin.
Yeah, so.
We're open for business.
And I understand that, and I'm all for growth, but what is it Pekin has right now that people can't get in Peoria, East Peoria, Morton? And it's an honest question. I'm not trying to
Sure, no, that's
be
fine.
negative about it. And we talked about the comprehensive plan and that it's outdated and needs some work. So I'm trying to tie it all together as far as the ring road is concerned.
So ultimately, I would say a project of that magnitude is a policy decision that city council wants to move forward with. I don't know why each individual city council member may or may not want to pursue it, but at least from my perspective, the city of Pekin was founded back when river traffic was a hub for economic opportunity. Still exists today, right? Alto is considering a multi-million-dollar investment in port infrastructure. An interstate is connecting directly to a transportation network that 474 gets you to is a significant advantage that the city of Pekin currently doesn't have. Certainly, Morton's got that. North Pekin, Market Heights, you know, I don't know whose land goes right up to that interchange. But as far as the city of Pekin's concerned, we don't have the direct benefit of everything around those interchanges. So if IDOT's gonna allow it, which they are, and the city can find a sustainable and responsible way to fund the project, it is going to create economic opportunity, be it, you know, I don't know, a Love's, intermodal transportation center, whatever ends up going out there, and then ultimately the corridor that takes you down into the Ludekin property. Even if the entire 1,000 acres is developed into homes, when I talk to, you know, major developers, the thing that keeps them in the conversation, I really believe, is the fact that we've got this solidified plan to engineer this road, and they believe that will absolutely help sell the homes in that area because of the ease of access to get right on the interstate and go to Peoria or Morton or wherever, Bloomington, wherever they're gonna go. So all of those things work together. I'm not saying, like, there is no calculation that I can make that says if we do this, it's gonna generate this. But as a strategy for 50 years worth of growth that the city council seems to wanna prioritize, you know, looking 50 years ahead into the future, this is a major strategy that helps create those areas of opportunity.
I'm gonna take over after this. I have said, they can hear me, I have said, when I first started running, look 40 years out, 40 years out. And I studied East Peoria. East Peoria bought all of where the factories were tore down. They bought it in 2000. And they thought, you know, you're crazy. You're buying, I think they called it brown land. You know, it was dirt. Look where it is today. 26 years later, somebody took a chance and they saw a vision, and that's what we did with Ludicans. We saw a chance, we had a vision, and we're trying to move forward. If it is not the data center, it is not the data center. We're trying to do our best, but that's what it is. 40 years out, look 40 years out. I'm looking for my grandkids, my great-grandkids.
Mayor
Yes,
Burris, to that
yes.
point, Caterpillar owned that land, Doug Oberhelman. Doug Oberhelman's wife is Diane Cullinan. I mean,
sold it to the city of East Peoria.
for $1.
I'm not quite sure what they took
It was
down.
very little, and I mean, there was a
And then
lot
she
of.
helped develop it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I do appreciate your vision, I do appreciate those things.
Thank you.
But can we also be honest that there was, not insider trading, but there was a significant advantage that the city of East Peoria had, that the city of Pekin does not.
Well, when the homeowner of Ludican came to us, I mean, she came to us and she said, I've been trying to do this for 25 years. And she was shocked that we at least took her phone call. So, you know, it was brought to us, it was an opportunity, a vision that we all shared to move this city forward. And like Mr. LaHood said,
Sure.
It's not just for the city of Pekin, it's a region. It is to help the region from Pekin, Groveland Township, Peoria, or excuse me, Creve Coeur, Market Heights, and North Pekin. So it is a regional plan that we are trying our best to pull us all together. Yes, sir.
Mayor, I can appreciate the efforts that you're making, but I have to be honest, I really resent you making the comparison between that land there and what you're trying to do here in Pekin.
The land in East Peoria? But it was, it was the same thing.
Can I add to that?
We have been told that we bought wasteland, have we not? Wasteland, beautiful land.
Compared to farmland?
But you're comparing.
No, that's
you're
what we
comparing
told us,
an area
that's what
in
they
East
told us
Peoria
about Ludican.
that is-
Yeah, they told us Ludican that we have bought gullies, wasteland, and beautiful land. I have to say it's beautiful land, but that's my opinion.
Okay,
Yeah.
can I please?
Sure.
Okay, a couple points. One, that land you're comparing in East Peoria, Caterpillar's land, it's already a dead zone. It was dead land.
But it's not anymore.
No.
Someone took a chance.
It is
Someone
dead
took
land.
a chance.
Ma'am, it's got buildings on it.
Yeah.
What we're talking about with Ludican Farm is, it is beautiful land. I'm raising my kids to love the land. It's not the same comparison. This one does not deserve to be destroyed. Part of my vision for my children is ensuring that the land, the community that they live in still has nature around it and isn't all bulldozed for growth. Growth can happen in the city and does not have to expand its footprint and continue to take down trees and continue to take down nature.
When you build homes, trees are gonna go down.
What I'm saying is, you have opportunities in this city to build homes. There's still land in the city of Pekin to build. We do not need to expand. And as far as the ring road, that decision was made before I was born.
Yeah.
And I am another generation coming in, and that is not my vision. And many of the people in my generation don't want the ring road. It is a ring road around Pekin. It's a straight shot for all the southern communities to leave our town and go to East Peoria and Peoria, where they offer the same exact things. Some of the best towns that I have visited are off the interstate and
So
take.
We just had a meeting with some developers, and they are stating how Marshall's is one of their busiest ones here in Pekin. So people are coming to Pekin because they study the zip codes, so they are coming to Pekin. I love it.
Mayor,
Yeah, I know, we're really getting
yeah,
off.
the library does close in about 7 minutes, and you got at least two other people that have questions here.
The ring road
All the way
was
in the
built
back.
originally.
All the way in the back. She
The
has
ring-
had
I
it
had
all.
my hand up too, and you tap danced around. The
Okay,
ring road
go
was
ahead.
built so the truck traffic wouldn't be tearing up Court
That's
Street
correct.
anymore.
That's correct.
And that's why, and then they stopped halfway and ran out of the money, and then you've got people like Pritzker, who 2 years in a row, his budget kicked, even though we're the county seat, he kicked Pekin off the budget for the transportation to continue repairing Court Street. Now they finally got it done, or partially done, but that's why the ring road, my parents went down, and when they voted on all that stuff, that's what it's meant to do, is keep the truck traffic out of the middle of
That's
town.
right, because we had all the grain elevators downtown and they went straight up.
And the second thing I wanna know from you is, if you kindly, and I'll shut my mouth, is what's the deadline on this? What's their deadline on that property on? I was told there's 2 90-day windows for everybody to pull out, and 24th or 26th of March is their deadline, and then you guys have the other 90-day window, which would carry us till June.
We have asked some questions, so I don't know what we wanna say.
Yeah,
And the
just-
lady in back, when you're done.
Yeah, in the real estate agreement that was, signed, they had an initial 9-month due diligence period from the execution date, which was in June, so March 24th actually is the 9-month deadline.
So they haven't done any of this.
No, hold on, let me finish. They also have the ability to extend their due diligence twice, if they so choose, by 6 months apiece. So right now, they have not, to my knowledge, requested an extension. My guess is they're going to. So that's, up to theoretically, March 24th of 2027 could be, the final deadline without any other, council action.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much, y'all.
I have
Y'all
a
gonna have a
question
data
and
center with you.
I have a comment.
Pardon me?
I have a question and I have a comment.
Sure.
The people that are saying that the Ludekin property is gullies and wasteland
Yeah.
don't live out there.
Okay, I agree.
And you say that you speak from the heart.
I do.
Have you actually went out there and
I
looked?
do, I hike it. That's what I
You
ask
have-
for Mother's,
do you
for Mother's
see it
Day every
from
year, is
our-
for my
do you
family
see
to
it
go
from
hike
our
it.
eyes?
To the park, to the park.
Do you see it from our
I do.
perspective?
I do. That's why I said, I am,
Then why
I am
develop
really
and
torn.
destroy it?
I am really torn.
We are more torn than you can ever
Okay,
imagine.
I feel you. You think I don't, but I really do. I really do.
At what point during a real estate transaction like this would an NDA be signed?
So generally, an NDA is gonna come at the front of an agreement. There has not been a non-disclosure agreement signed by any from the city, from my knowledge, certainly not me or any of the staff that I'm aware of. I don't even think the mayor knows how to.
Would you guys be the ones that signed it, or would it be city council?
Generally, it would be everybody involved in the project.
And we would request that you do not sign any NDAs.
Yeah, they have not asked us to sign an NDA, so.
They're gonna run us out of here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, everybody. There'll be more to come.
Pardon me?
Town hall gonna work, the next one.
Same format.
Pretty much?
Yeah.
Yeah.